Well, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time, hi, my name is Ella, and on this channel, we talk about anything English, namely self-study strategies, common and useful tools and resources I recommend. And on the off chance, I also talk about my life, but in English. That way you can enjoy just watching your usual YouTube videos, but also learning English phrases here and there on the go. With that said, let's move into today's topic, which is some common questions that I received based on either some videos I made in the past or very recently the self-study ebook that I came out with. 老师，请问走遍美国因为是很老的教材，口语表达会不会过时了？现在不实用呢？另外，请问我大学英语6级勉强过，是从新概念2开始背的，然后是美英版，还是看美剧？好像美剧我都没有办法坚持，不太感兴趣或者坚持不下来，感觉自己水平还是不行，语速有时候太快，连读跟不上，学着学着就放弃了，或者还是先学走遍美国，有适合我情况的美剧或者动画片推荐吗？老师，我有个问题，就是听力训练时总是习惯一个词一个词的翻译中文，然后组成一个完整的句子，所以该怎么样跳过这个过程，直接明白一句英文的中文意思？另外最后一个问题 self-talk 时说来说去都是一样的话怎么办呢？ This is question number 1. This is all coming from the same person. First of all, it sounded like you're a little clueless as to why you're doing what you're doing, from 走遍美国 Family Album USA to picking a sitcom, an American sitcom such as Friends, and then you have problem listening, you have problem translating it. All of this boils down to 1, not knowing what your current level is at. I know you mentioned you got 大学英语6级. I would highly suggest that you look past it because there's shortcuts, fast tracks, test strategies, and besides, it doesn't test your speaking, it doesn't test your 连读 skills, and the words or rather language input that they test you on aren't even the common phrases and expressions that native speakers would use, native English speakers in America would use, or native English speakers in England would use. The stuff you're learning, even if you're good at it, is most of the time not that useful in real life application. So I would just look past your score completely and break your current level down to how good my pronunciation is, how good my grammar is, and how many words do I know, how well I know them. If you were struggling with listening to American TV shows, it could be a multitude of reasons, but one of the most immediate ones that you can get rid of right away is honing pronunciation. More specifically, your connected speech, 就是连读的问题。如果你一直回避，没有系统去解决，你听得再多遍，听得再慢，再重复多少次，都还是会遇到同样的问题。Not to mention, when it comes to watching an authentic material such as a TV show or a podcast, materials that native speakers make for their own fellow native speakers, the difficulty is way more intense than a language textbook. So you have to ease yourself into it. You have to be prepared to look up difficult words. And it sounded like even if you were just learning 走遍美国 Family Album USA or 新概念英语2, these traditional language textbooks, the emphasis seemed to be, well, you didn't really have an emphasis. You mentioned you were memorizing these passages, these conversations, but especially with your 英语6级勉强过, probably your grammar basics was lacking also. So even if you were memorizing these sentences, passages, conversations, I doubt that you fully understood them. I doubt that you even knew what you were memorizing. Generally speaking, when I give a student a piece of language material or an article, something to read, something to pick up words from, they will need to have a firm grasp on the pronunciation, all the basic pronunciation tips and a firm structure of basic grammar rules before I give them anything to read. So as far as your first, second, and third questions go, don't even worry about language materials right now, especially not 美剧 or 动画片. American TV shows or cartoons are probably a bit above your pay grade, not just in terms of vocab, but all the elements mentioned above. Okay, pronunciation, namely connected speech and grammar. And then when it comes to vocab, we need to make sure you have a good dictionary, such as the Longman one, and then you need to focus purely on the first 3,000 words. Again, if you want to look into how to study them, where to find these words, check out my book. I cannot emphasize enough. It's not about memorizing, using rote memory, using brute force. It's not about that. And then your final 2 questions, when it comes to listening, you have a habit of translating every single word into Chinese, and you want to skip the translation process and get to comprehension right away. This is a great question. Before you start blind listening to a material, I would advise you to either transcribe that audio into a text material like transcript, or just consume input materials that already come with text and audio at the same time. So your typical TV shows will usually have dual subtitles. So when you're watching, you can obviously hear what they're saying and you can see the subtitles. Or most books these days will have audiobooks, so you can read and listen at the same time. But if you're practicing pure listening with a subpart pronunciation and grammar structure, this is not a right or I guess quality input material. Let's say you're translating every single word into Chinese. My analysis first is that you have been learning words this way your entire life, okay? Every time you pick up a new word, it's either from a language textbook written by Chinese people, and in the back of the textbook you'll have a vocab list, and on the left it goes spelling this English word, and then on the right is the Chinese translation. So it stands to reason why you would translate every single English word into Chinese, because you've been taught to learn English words that way, especially complex abstract words that you can't touch, words that express a certain emotion or motion, words that have multiple different meanings, words that are very versatile. By contrast, words like cups, lights, movies, cameras, obviously you can translate them into Chinese because they only have one single meaning. But words like go, get, take, hang, adverbs, adjectives are hard to translate word for word into Chinese. Those words you have to, 1, use an English monolingual dictionary and ditch 有道翻译、有道词典、有道Google 翻译 or even Google 的解释 Google 的词典 and use either Longman or Cambridge or Oxford. All of these British dictionaries are great. Like, don't use the American ones. Don't use Collins or Merriam-Webster. They suck, but that's another story. Use an actual dictionary. Use a proper monolingual dictionary. If you're not used to the monolingual aspect, like use a Chinese English one. At least it will give you how to use this word in a sentence as opposed to just a 1-word or 2-word translation. So step number 1 is to stop learning these words in Chinese by using Chinese translation. That way you would at least understand them in a sentence, understand them in a simpler English expression. Rather. And ultimately, you gotta read more, you gotta have more language input, you gotta rely on monolingual dictionaries more, you gotta rely on context more. That way, when you think about a sentence, when you try to speak a sentence later on, you won't think of Chinese and then translate that Chinese phrase into English. When you don't have that process of translating, whether you're trying to speak or when you're trying to understand things, it just speeds everything up. Not only does it speed everything up, it also takes out all the guesswork, because let's say you're trying to express gratitude to someone, like if they helped you with something, and if you're trying to express gratitude, if you translate, you would think, oh, 辛苦了 in Chinese, and then you're trying to realize, okay, 辛苦 doesn't really make sense in English. But if you have enough input prior, you will see that in conversations, in language materials, in English language textbooks, or even on TV, on, Modern Family, they will say, oh, I appreciate what you did for me. That was really nice of you. It's not a direct translation of 辛苦, but it has a similar connotation. So that's what I meant by consuming more authentic material. And just generally speaking, don't learn complex words by their Chinese, at least word-for-word translation. And then finally, self-talk 时候说来说去都是一样的话怎么办? So self-talk or self-writing are both forms of output. And my rule of thumb is before you even think about output, focus on your input first. And you're not even supposed to think of input right away, your foundation is lacking. Your foundation in pronunciation is lacking. Your foundation in grammar is lacking also. So you can't even read 2 sentences without panicking and trying to figure out what this means. So this is not a time to focus on output right away. The only time you should be focusing on writing anything or like coming up with your own sentence, be it in speeches or in writing, is when you learn a new word and you're trying to see how you would put that new word in a sentence. Other than that, sure, write a diary, go for it, but don't do it with the hope of trying to make sense to the other person. For instance, my German is still very beginner. Given the hours I put in, given the amount of input that I have, I am nowhere near doing any sort of self-talk or engaging in a back and forth conversation. I mean, my tutor tries to get me to talk, but it's only to reinforce what I learned from the class before. It's not really trying to conduct a conversation. And I certainly don't think or speak to myself in German in any capacity. That being said, every time I learn a new German word, I would force myself to make up my own sentence. There is a time and place for you to make up your own language, focus on output, but it's still done in a very controlled fashion, and it's not done to conduct a conversation. That's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna go up to a German dude and be like, Ich bin heute 5 Uhr gegangen, spazieren gegangen. And if I did that, they will say something back and then I'm done for because I don't have enough input to continue the conversation. Focus on input, and before focusing on input, focus on your foundation, and then try to get as many words, as many language materials in you, study them for a few months before you even think about self-talk or talking to a native speaker. Otherwise, you're just fooling yourself. And sometimes native speakers will play along happily because you're paying them, and they're like, sure, I can talk to you, but you just repeat yourself. Like you said, you repeat yourself because you don't have enough vocab, okay? If you're not exposing yourself to more words, more difficult words in different contexts and authentic language materials, yeah, of course you're gonna repeat yourself, use the same words over and over again, and native speakers will happily take your money because it's an easy job. They just have to talk to you. They will compliment you. They will compliment on your pronunciation and whatnot. They might correct your pronunciation and basic grammar mistakes, but overall, your level is still gonna stay the same. And you will have lost a fortune because it ain't cheap talking to native speakers, at least from what I heard. All right, that said, I will conclude this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to check out my course/ebook. Leave a comment down below, email me, reach out to me to get a one-on-one lesson if you want to save time. All right, bye.